about the environment, which is why I invited you to talk to us today. And so this is their second civics lesson. The first one was with voting. And so after voting, we are into the environment. So they've had voting rights and they have the environment. So we hear from multiple voices, multiple perspectives. We know from the oil industry that both Republicans and Democrats are getting campaign contributions. And we know it's very, very difficult when it comes to the environment to address those concerns, but you are trying. And so you are talking to us today. On Thursday, we have an oil representative. So they have questions for you, but I'm going to let you address them first. And then hopefully we have time for questions from them. I don't want to hold you longer than 15 minutes. I know you're very busy. So if you don't mind, can you just tell us what's going on with you as far as fracking or anything else you want to discuss?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, so 3 years ago, I introduced a bill that was a pause on fracking. It wasn't an absolute ban, but we had 1,000 permits pending. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but we have 110,000 wells in the state of New Mexico. Guess how many inspectors we have?
2?
4. Okay,
4.
you're close. 8. We have 8 inspectors in the whole state of New Mexico for 110,000 wells. And so when I learned that, I thought, you know what, we need to pause this and just figure out what's going on. Well, that didn't go over very well. It didn't. It had one committee hearing, and it didn't go anywhere. And I think it was misinterpreted. People were saying, or misconstrued, people were saying that it was a ban on fracking, and it was going to stop all income from the state, and it would affect education. And that wasn't true, because there were 110 permits, 1,010 permits pending, and that would have given them time to open new wells, up to 1,000 new wells for a long period of time, and it would have given the state time to study the issue. Well, in the interim, we have studied the issue, and I'm not introducing the pause this time because I like what the state is doing. We've published, the state has regulated produced water, and that is the water that fracking, first of all, uses tons of water. In fact, there's a basin in eastern New Mexico that is going dry because they've just really used so much water from that basin. And so they suck the water out of the basin, and then they put it down these holes, and then they mix it with toxic chemicals, and they won't tell us what's in the toxic chemicals. They put it down in there, and they mix it with sand, and then they have explosions, and these wells go for miles and miles and miles. And so these explosions release the oil from the shale, and then what comes up is oil and produced water.
Right.
What they call produced water, because it's produced by this process. And this water is further toxified by radiation that is down there, and other natural toxins that are in the area. And then oil and gas has to dispose of it. So what they've been doing to dispose of it is they're drilling wells and putting it deep, deep in the ground in layers, geologic formations. And what they found in Oklahoma and now in Texas, that water has put a lot of pressure on those formations, and it's caused earthquakes.
Yes.
So all of that is going on. And so what I'm working on now, instead of the pause of fracking, is I'm working on what is called the Green Amendment. And it's the Green Amendment for your generation, basically. It's to ensure that we have a constitutional right to clean air, land, and water. And I have the text of the Green Amendment right here, and I'm happy to email it to you, Mr. Williams.
Yes.
But it's really important. It basically gives the people, it says the people of the state of New Mexico have the natural, inherent, and inalienable right to a clean and healthy environment, including water, air, soil, flora, fauna, ecosystems, and climate. And the reason for that is just to give you a long history. During the Richardson administration, Governor Richardson's administration had passed a lot of environmental and climate change regulations in the agencies, and Governor Martinez came in and summarily reversed them. And so what this would do, and the court, they went to the court and the court said, well, there's nothing we can do about it. And so this would give the court something to do about it.
Right.
And so that's a big reason. And then the other reason is to have the people vote on how important the environment is. So the people, if this passes the legislature, it'll go to the voters and voters will vote for it in 2022. And then that's going to, I think, change the conversation around here from one that's protecting oil and gas as an industry to one that's protecting the environment. So with that, so that's what's going on with me with legislation. But with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, first, again, let me say thank you so much. I think this is so cool. Yeah, give it up for her again. That you were able to come and talk to our class here. They've been, researching fracking for about a week, and they looked at all aspects of.
Oh, so what I said wasn't new. Yeah.
No, what you said wasn't new, but it was right on point, and you're fracking. So thank you so much. So we're going to open it up right now. So class, if you have questions that you want to ask the senator, please go for it.
So my question for you is, how are the laws and regulations going? Is there a lot of unfunding or not a lot of supports on your side?
That's a great question. We've done some good things in the environment. We've passed a law that created, I joked, I said it's the pause on fracking without the pause. There is now a committee that is studying fracking. So that's studying, I shouldn't say fracking, studying the transition that is necessary in New Mexico to move from an oil and gas industry to a renewable energy industry. So that was a good bill. And then we have a bill that allows local governments to be stricter than the federal government. And I don't know if you're aware, but the federal government has what's known as a Halliburton exception, where fracking water is not subject to the Clean Water Act. And so that's a real problem. And hopefully we can pass legislation in the state to make sure that that water is subject to the Clean Water Act. And then the administration, the Lujan Grisham administration, through its regulations, has passed regulations on produced water and on methane emissions. Because as you know, fracking also produces a lot of methane. And so to basically limit flaring and, just to try to make sure that those methane regulate. So one of the things that's weird about that is methane is a gas that they should be paying royalties on, but instead they're just throwing it up into the air and contributing to climate change. And so those regulations are really important. But in the Senate and in the House, oil and gas has a lot of influence. There is a report that I believe it was Common Cause published that talks about the millions of dollars they spend on campaign contributions. And so that's a little bit of a problem. And I won't take oil and gas money because I don't want anybody to think I'm bought by the oil and gas industry. But that's not true for a lot of other individuals. And so they have a lot of influence. Not that they're buying votes, I'm not saying that, but they can go into people's offices and tell them, well, this is going to hurt the industry. And the truth is oil and gas does provide a lot of money to the state coffers. So we've got to figure that out. We've got to figure out, because it's not going to be available forever. In fact, we've suffered in New Mexico because the price of oil goes up and down. And so sometimes we'll have a lot of money for education, and then sometimes we'll have a little bit, and it goes up and down. So I think that there's an awareness that we need to do something, and we'll see. I have 22 co-sponsors of the Green Amendment right now. And so that is great. I'll send a link to your professor so you can see who's co-sponsoring it, and the text of the amendment, and more information about it. But great question. Thank you, Oscar.
¿Cómo afecta a la sociedad el proceso no regulado de fracking?
Sí, muy buen pregunta. Pues, can I answer in English? Do you have an interpreter? Okay. Porque estos términos son muy difíciles para mí en español porque son muy técnicos. Pero el fracking afecta la sociedad. Por ejemplo, hay una familia en Carlsbad, que había un pipeline. Había un pipeline. Should I do this? Okay. Había un pipeline y se exploró. It exploded. Y ese agua cayó en su huerta y murieron los perros, los cabras y el piel de la familia, porque estaban afuera, they got pustules on their skin. Y ese efecto era muy fuerte. Y también donde hay fracking, hay problemas con el respiro. It aggravates asthma. Hay problemas de salud con también el methane. Contribuye a global change, climate change, global warming, y esos son los efectos. Pero socialmente también hay muchos trabajadores que trabajan en esa industria. Por eso es muy importante de tener conciencia de eso y entrenarlos a trabajos que se encuentra in renewable energy. So basically what I said, that it's got a lot of health impacts. Fracking has a lot of health impacts. Both the methane can really hurt the lungs, and people with asthma have a lot of trouble with it. And then it also, I told a story of a family in Carlsbad where a pipeline that carries produced water exploded, and the produced water rained on the family, and they lost their dog, their goats, and their skin got pustules on it. And so that tells you a lot about the health impact, the potential health impacts of fracking. But then socially, which is the question Alondra asked, there are a lot of workers that work in the industry, in the oil and gas industry. So it's really important to remember that and to help them transition and get jobs in a renewable energy economy. So that maybe instead of 8 inspectors, because they know it, we could have like 50, 100 inspectors and hire them to inspect. And we could get them involved in solar energy and wind energy and transition them into a new economy that's not so dirty.
Senator Cedillo Lopez, thank you so much. I promised only 15 minutes. I know you are working on redistricting, and you're very busy in Senate, and we want to give it up for you again. And
Thank you. Yeah, this is what I'm working on.
And you're sending that to me, correct?
Yeah, I will send you the link to I have a webpage that has the text of the amendment, and then it has additional resources. So I'll send that to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your interest, and I appreciate you so much.
How do you make sure that New Mexico doesn't get polluted? And do you guys have like something to like measure the pollution that's like in the air or that causes pollution by fracking?
Sure. And let's talk about, I'm going to split the question up a little bit. What pollution would come from fracking directly? If we're careful and don't spill fluids onto the surface, which then have to be cleaned up, then the quote unquote pollution that would come from the act of fracking itself would be the exhaust of the engines for the trucks that are running with the pumps. They're very similar to an 18-wheeler driving down the road. So I don't view that as a particularly large source of pollution. So, but that's the fracking itself. And I think I want to split this up because there are other aspects of oil and gas development that do need to be addressed. And I think you're trying to ask a broader question than that. I'm going to go ahead and try to answer that broader question. Because once you have fracked a well, you're then going to produce the frack water back, and you're going to produce oil and gas and produced water that comes from the reservoir. And we want to make sure that that's done with as little pollution as possible. Is that kind of where you're going on your question? Okay. A couple of things. Number one, the oil and gas industry is a heavily regulated industry. And in fact, we've just come through about a 2-year rulemaking process that has put in place some enhanced anti-pollution measures. Let's just call them that. We're finished with one of the 2 agencies that has rulemaking authority, and we're right in the middle of the other rulemaking agency that has that regulates the oil and gas business. So you probably have heard of flaring and may have seen flaring. You may have driven through areas where there's flares on the top of a flare stack that are burning off natural gas. The main regulator of the oil business in New Mexico is the Oil Conservation Division, or OCD. The OCD has just put in place new rules. They became effective last summer that number one, prohibit routine flaring. In essence, if you don't have a place to put your natural gas, then you're not allowed to produce the oil and burn the gas off. Okay. I want to put a pin in that just for a second, because I'm going to come back to where's the gas come from. Let's talk about other things first. So not only is it not allowed to routine flare, we're also required, and it's going to take a little time to transition to this, oil and gas companies will be required to capture 98% of all of the gas that they produce by the year 2027. Now, a lot of companies are starting at a relatively low percentage of capture. Some are already pretty high, but all of them are going to have to be at 98% of capture by the end of 2026. That's going to be a challenge, but it's a good challenge. It's a good thing for the industry to do. It's a good thing to keep the gas in the pipeline. It's a good thing to keep the gas out of the air. There are a couple of exceptions that they've given for true emergencies, because we want to protect people. If you've got a real problem and you need to send gas to the flare to keep something from blowing up, that's going to be okay in limited circumstances. But at least they've got to they've got to report those to the state. So the state's going to have all this information about what was produced, what was flared, what was used beneficially. We have things that are in our production facilities that actually use gas. We've got heaters. We burn gas for heaters. And so those things are beneficial use. But generally speaking, those are some of the toughest rules that any state has put out in the entire United States on oil and gas capture. So number one, our industry is working hard to reduce the amount of gas that is being flared or vented. Now, vented just means it's let into the atmosphere without being burned, and flared just means that whatever that gas is gets consumed by fire through a flare stack or a combustor. So as far as air is concerned, and venting and flaring, that's been well taken care of by the OCD in this last round of rulemaking. We're in the middle of another round of rulemaking with the New Mexico Environment Department. And they're the agency that looks at other air emissions, things like if you're running an engine at your location, that engine has to meet certain exhaust standards. You take your car in and get them inspected, right? And one of the things they do is they put a sensor in your exhaust pipe and see, is your car meeting the requirements for emissions in the state of New Mexico? Very similar process here. They've set brand new emission standards for engines in the oil field, and they're tougher than they were before. There's a whole raft of other areas that they are contemplating rules that will reduce the amount of emissions from oil and gas production operations in the state of New Mexico. Quite frankly, and you think about this in the big picture. If a barrel of oil or MCF of gas is going to be consumed, then it's going to be produced somewhere. If that's the case, then it would be actually better to produce that barrel or that MCF in New Mexico. Why is that? Well, number one, we've got tougher environmental standards in New Mexico than they have, say, in Venezuela or Russia or some of these other places. So it's a cleaner barrel. That's a cleaner MCF. You'd rather have it here if the air we all breathe is the same air across the world, which it is. The second part is that New Mexico barrel provides jobs for our people in New Mexico, and it provides a lot of tax revenues for the state that support folks like Mr. Williams and the other folks that educate you and keep you safe, your police, your fire, your hospitals. Those barrels produce, Gloria, over $5 billion of income to the state that helps them have not only a balanced budget, but a budget surplus. So if you've got good regulations, which New Mexico is really amping up their regulations, you'd rather produce that barrel in New Mexico than anywhere else.
How is fracking going to affect our future, our environmental future and economical future?
Okay. Environment future. There's a lot of things, I guess to me, the environmental impact of the hydraulic fracture stimulation itself is coming down. Why do I say that? Well, number one is 10 years ago, most of the industry probably used fresh water for all of their hydraulic frac jobs. And today, we've strongly moved away from using fresh water. We're down to, it depends on which month you're in, either 5% to 15%, somewhere around 8 to 10% of all the water used for hydraulic fracturing these days is fresh water. We have, as an industry, we've moved away from using fresh water and used more what they call brackish water, which is between 1,000 and 10,000 parts per million of total dissolved solids, or even saline water, which is even saltier than that. Basically by using produced water itself. We produce it, we store it in a lined pit that doesn't allow it to hit the ground, and we use it for the next frac job. That has been a huge savings in fresh water, so that we have a much smaller impact on freshwater use now and going forward. This is not something that's going to revert. I mean, I know there's some places where a landowner has leased their land to an oil company, and part of their lease contract states that they will, in fact, buy fresh water from them for fractures. That's a problem for that operator. He really doesn't have any option to use either produced water or something with a lower quality. But I know those companies are interested in trying to work away from using fresh water, and we've been very successful at that. So the actual impact itself of the actual frac jobs themselves is small, and it's already getting smaller. If you can think of some areas that you're concerned about in that area, please let me know that, because I may just not be thinking of what you're concerned about. As far as economics are concerned, the economic benefit of hydraulic fracturing has been a tremendous, tremendous boon to New Mexico. Virtually every drilling rig working in Southeast New Mexico is drilling horizontal wells. And even if you drilled vertical wells, even the majority of those are hydraulically fracture stimulated because our reservoir rocks are just not that great. So there are a lot of positive benefits economically that come from hydraulic fracturing. Like, as I said, our company had a big acreage position in Southeast New Mexico, and it was difficult for us to come up with a good drilling development budget year after year, just because it was so difficult to find good quality reservoir locations to drill and develop. We drilled quite a few dry holes or wells that just didn't produce very much. Once we figured out, along with the rest of the industry, that you could drill horizontal wells and put hydraulic fractures on these horizontal wells, it was like, wow, we were drilling through stuff that we didn't even think was economic at all. And it's a fantastic economic resource today. So that's been the big, big change, not only in Southeast New Mexico, but Northwest New Mexico as well.
And I really do appreciate it. You've opened the eyes of my students, and I know they had concerns, and you've addressed those concerns, and it was very informative. And again, I appreciate it, and thank you for your time.
Mr. Williams, thanks for the opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, I sure appreciate your attention and your good questions.
Thank you. See you guys later.